Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take you for a brief moment to the world of wall paintings. So, the walls of the former concentration camp have impressive colors, and this cannot be imagined, especially in that place. First, a brief definition of what wall painting is. These are various means of artistic expression, such as paintings and decorations, that have been painted with a dye on the wall. In the former main camp, Auschwitz I, they were displayed on all floors of the prisoner residential block, and all types of wall paintings were created by camp prisoners. When you look at this graphic, a very simplified cross section of a building on the right hand side, you can see that we are speaking about the thinnest and the most sensitive element of the building. It is a very thin layer of material which, because of various destruction factors, degrades and fades with time. Before I move on to the conservation aspect, I would like to show to you which objects we are dealing with. The first category are artistic wall paintings. So the paintings show such subjects as human figures, animals, landscapes, still lifes, and many more. The majority of authors remain unknown, and in Auschwitz I, 30 such paintings have been preserved. The next category comprises colored wall treatments, so decorative wall finishes. So interiors of prisoner blocks look like civilian buildings of that time. It was a very popular interior finishing technique in Germany at that time. So it was made by painting spots, and in former Auschwitz I camp, there was thousands of square meters of wall treatments which have been preserved. The next category are disciplinary uh, uh, watchwords, and these were also watchwords and slogans which were painted by function prisoners. And also, in reality, this was supposed to show to other function prisoners to show that everybody must be disciplined. 50 such watchwords and slogans have been preserved. On the walls, there are also drawings, engravings, and other inscriptions. The majority of them were made in secret, and they are the last signs, the last traces of the victims of the camp, and the majority of them are in the cells of block number 11. That is the death block, and there are several thousand of such drawings. And now I will discuss the conservation rules. Our largest challenge is the great number of such objects, and it is very important for us to know where the objects are located. So we carried out stock taking and inventories, and on the basis of that, we made regular controls of the condition of preservation, where we learn what the main problems in preservation are, and we establish the priority for works.
We have those cards that you can see on the slide. These are checklists, like at an airport. Those checklists make it possible for us to do planning, the result of the control of each individual site can be immediately seen looking at this document, for example. Here we have information about the condition category, very good, good, sufficient, poor, very poor. At the bottom, there are those there's information about damages. You can also add your comments. And at the end, there is this summary according to the color chart. And we say whether we have to observe it, do nothing, or perhaps you need to run quickly and save it. This one was categorized as intervention necessary. You needed some cleaning of the surface and stabilize the painted layer. We do our conservation based on that. As has been mentioned, we document all our works, not only photography, but also in writing. We use electromagnetic radiation from ultraviolet to infrared. For example, for that slogan, in infrared, you can see the sketch made in pencil. This is interesting for us because we receive knowledge on how the inscription was made, especially when we don't know the author. Here, for example, that inmate was certainly an expert and he was very carefully working. He first got this ready in pencil and only then he made it with a specialist brush for lettering. So he probably worked in one of the painting details and he was a letter painter. Various electromagnetic radiations are also used to see some hardly legible inscriptions. For example, here, mostly the pencil faded badly since 1945 to the 80s, and we can prove it. And from the 80s, it's been in the condition that we can see here on the left-hand side, and it's no longer going, it's no longer fading. A very important element in our work is the research of the material, of the composition, and the changes that take place here. Only when we learn what we have before us can we understand why the site is being degraded, what the reasons for damage are, to be able to select an appropriate method, and therefore we focus on the materials because they are what carries the historical information, and it's the material that ages. When the material is gone, the object, the individual element is gone. We try not to sample, to do non-invasive testing, but sometimes sampling cannot be avoided. One of the factors destroying wall paintings is microbiological damage. In this painting, we had those suspected bluish, yellowish hinges, and our microbiologists decided it was fungus and it shouldn't be here. We used cotton swabs and ethanol, and in this blue square on the right-hand side, you can see the first very careful attempt at removing that fungus. There are also other dangers such as dust, insects, salt, cobwebs, and so forth. Naturally, we also remove those from the surface of the objects. The most frequent destructive factor is the loss of mechanical properties of those painted layers. They move away from the wall or they start flaking, which means that they may fall due to forces of gravity. We protect them on the wall with proper means and we put glue below them. Let's stay with this object. You can see a greater detail of the same slogan, and you can see what it was like before and after conservation. After is on the right. In some places, what kept the letters on the wall were our Japanese papers. You can wonder why the condition on the right I call ready post-conservation, while still some letters are missing. Well, that results from our guidelines, as we've mentioned. We predominantly run protective conservation, which means, as I said earlier, we focus on protecting the original material, the authentic material, and we do not reconstruct. We do not add things that are gone to preserve this character of a witness of history. We conserve the site as received. We only do the most necessary steps, and we call it minimum intervention, only as much as to make sure that it is as untransformed for future generations as possible. Wall painting, that's an integral part of the whole building. That's why its conservation is often complex, often very complex. You always need to remember and to take into account the condition of the whole building. Conservation is always a multidisciplinary task, as conservation experts of murals, of all the wall paintings. We work with microbiologists, photographs, and others. There's manual work which follows high ethical standards, especially at this place, and also standards of science. On behalf of our team, I'd like to thank very cordially for your attention. Welcome again. Let me now share with you a presentation on conservation and preservation of crematoria and gas chambers number 2 and 3 within the former KL Birkenau. The crematoria and gas chambers operated here from 43 to 45, actually until January 45, when they were on purpose destroyed by Germans. Even though the buildings of crematoria and gas chambers were blown up, the perpetrators did not manage to obliterate the traces of the crimes they are perpetrated here. You can still see the individual parts of those that played particular functions. You can see the undressing room, the gas chamber proper, and the stoves. The current condition of retention is results from the works that were conducted on the ruins beginning with the 1960s. Without many years of that effort to retain the ruins, these would have certainly not survived to this day in the form, in the condition you can see them. This is what they looked like after the war. And at the bottom, you can see those protective works, construction works, which were conducted in the past on the former undressing room. That's the site number 3. For a long time, actually, since the very start of work on preservation of ruins, work on retaining the efficiency of original water discharge continues to dewater the ruins. It's of key importance for the survival of these elements, as a majority of those is situated below the level of the ground. This this slide shows the historical plan from June 42, which presents the water removal from the gas chamber number 2. This dewatering line comes here as black lines, and most of it operates till this day, thanks to us conserving it very efficiently. That greatly helps the survival of those sites. The reason for conducting works here is to uh, keep those for future and keep them legible. It's not about retaining every particle of matter that you can find here, because we are aware that this objectively is impossible. However, we try to make sure that what we found survives and lasts as long as possible in the best condition possible. The task is extremely difficult, first of all, due to the form of the site. Ruins of the crematoria and gas chambers are sites where large areas are filled with rubble. Very often they are either inaccessible, hardly accessible. The following aspect is the complexity of materials. We have a range of different construction materials here, reinforced concrete, bricks, metal reinforcement rods, and also Ackerman bricks. They are connected, often intermingled, which badly renders planning and conducting works harder. Moreover, these are materials which are very infrequently found in contemporary conservation, like the Ackerman bricks that I've mentioned. They are a very characteristic element of our structures. Another issue that influences those sites is the lack of option to limit the actual impact. Those sites are exposed to the changing atmospherical factors, external, also the pressure of underground waters. There are no ceilings over them, which used to stabilize the walls of the undressing room and the guest chamber. Also, the groundwaters and the groundwater table also makes a powerful impact here. What we can see in this photo is the inside of the guest chamber number 2. Relics of the uh, ceiling slabs have been preserved. On the right-hand side, this is a reinforced concrete slab where you can see that the elements are strongly and badly eroded. And this is a section of reinforced ferroconcrete where you can see the reinforcing rod, and the mineral filler has been nearly absolutely cracked out. The work on the ruins is conducted in 2 ways. The first is current work, which helps to maintain the site in good condition. We run regular flushing of the drainage so we can efficiently remove water, cleaning, removal of weeds, also supporting some construction elements until the works have been concluded. Another type of work are project works, whose scope covers complex work on a specific issue that you find on site or a specific area of those ruins. Conservation works here and works on gas chambers 2 and 3 have been carried out since 2003. 2004-15, the work on the ruins was conducted by the museums thanks to the support from Ronald Lauder Foundation. At the time, these covered documentation of the ruins. Also, airline photography of the ruins was carried out at the time. Right-hand side shows the photo documentation, which are aerial pictures. That's a metric representation of the ruins. The remaining photographs result from object scans. We have the cloud, the points cloud, which lets us document, or rather use for documentation, various cross sections through the site. And these can look as we illustrate at the bottom picture for you. As far as drainage goes, monitoring was conducted, and you can see this example here on the left-hand side. There were also works connected to repairing that, as well as also the valves were installed, which was important because it safeguarded those sites from water coming from outside.
An important scope of works here were the protections and temporary supports, and these works were carried out in two stages. Initially, the supports were made with the use of wooden elements with a very simple method originally used in mines, but the final, the eventual ones were done with steel supports, and then we do not return to these fragments which are protected and for a longer time. So we can really rely on such support and protection. An important scope of works was also the protection of gas chambers, especially against the pressure of the ground. And the gas chambers of both objects were used, and there was a special system of pillars was introduced outside the walls, and they penetrated deep into the ground, whereas at the top they were connected with a concrete element called as support, which stabilizes such an element. So we can see the scope of drilling here. We also see the uh, final situation where we see the cover, and this construction was initially performed underground. So after this was all this was all done, this cap construction protected the walls of the gas chamber and against the pressure of the ground. And the last stage, obviously, was the documentation concerning the walls of undressing room. This wall was really uh, very slanting, and then the underground construction was built, and uh, some concrete pillars were introduced, and this, once introduced within a distance from the historic wall, was supposed to protect against moving and deformities, and also it allowed for adding additional anchors so that the wall doesn't move. And uh, uh, we can see uh, that since 2016 the works connected with the protection and conservation uh, of uh, is done by Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation. We can see the works in progress. Uh, these are the works that I previously discussed, and you can see the columns which stabilize the ground, and the task is to support the wall. On the surface of the walls, there are some anchoring elements which were visible uh, on the facade outside, and also inside the wall there were additional elements. They were called hash because they were introduced into the wall structure, and thanks to that, the inside in the interior fewer stabilizing elements were seen. Similar scopes of works were also performed in the southern wall, that is the wall opposite. So this is the fragment of the wall before the works and after the works were completed. Uh, and these are the walls before the conservation, when uh, some defects are seen with a lot of cracks. So we can see some uh, displacement of the wall, and because of the construction elements, it was necessary to introduce the stabilizing elements. And on the second of the wall, that is the southern wall, this was introduced uh, into lines, into rows, and the southern line was uh, much more damaged than the northern one, and this is the condition after the preliminary stage connected with the protection. And also the works uh, covered the conservation of the reinforcement elements, and you can see that this was in the undressing room and in the gas chamber. And here you could see all the reinforced concrete elements were conserved, and you can see the effects of such works where the reinforcement was protected, and here you can see the condition of corroded reinforcement before the works were started. An important scope of works was cleaning of the ruins from biological layers. And on the photographs on the left-hand side, you can see the condition of the building before the works were started. And these are the elements covered with a thick layer of uh, moss. And on the right hand side you can see the effects of our cleaning process where all the biological layers were removed, and you could see the protection against later biological intervention, and we try to keep this uh, this situation until today as part of our conservation technique. To close, I would like to present to you the works which were completed this year. These works covered the construction protection and conservation work. These works concerned the protective palisade, uh, and this is the assemble of the anchors, and these elements were introduced into the bonds after the works are completed. No bonds will be seen anymore. These are the protection in forms of bands that stabilize detached elements of the concrete. An important scope of conservation works, which was performed last year, these were the works for at the plates, at the ceiling place with plates with the bricks made from the reinforced concrete, and these were difficult because of the difficult accessibility of these fragments, because the places that you see in the photographs you can see inside the ruins, and these are the bottom parts of the ceiling plates. This is one of the elements which is completely uncovered reinforcement of the former bar, and this is also the situation after the conservation with carefully protected elements of the uh, of the reinforcement. And here you can see also the works in which you use the specialist agents for the protection of reinforced concrete. And this is the preserved fragment of the concrete on the ceiling made from Ackerman bricks, which was protected and implemented. There were some bands introduced on the edges of the concrete with the intention to protect them against falling out. Also, some injections were made, thanks to which the empty spaces between the bricks and the concrete were filled. And these are the next elements. On the left-hand side, there is a fragment of the wall inside the underground container. Uh, and this is the situation before and after the conservation. And these were the defects in the brick wall, which were filled. And this is one of the pillars within the stove hole. And this has some elements of reinforcement which are strongly corroded. These are defects, and also concrete covers, and you can see the condition of the conservation work. So where the reinforcement was uncovered, it was protected with some repair or with special anti-corrosion paint, especially where in the places where it was completely devoid of any color at all. For the first time, we also made the support of the ceiling slabs in because and the ribs, because these are very irregular elements, because we were unable to use the methods that we are familiar with. That is why we introduced a special construction with a very significant scope of regulation, thanks to which we were able to adapt specific elements to the shape of the ceiling slab. And here you can see the method of protection by means of supporting the ribs of the Ackermann ceiling with special rails, as if to put it, with an insulated layer of the concrete, and that is why they are supported in construction.
So this is a very interesting scope that is last to be carried out. In this slide, you can see that some of the works were conducted in the ruins of the underground room. So in the past, there were some supports introduced, and they have been replaced by an entirely new construction, a construction that is far better adjusted to the form, which is often irregular. Obviously, the entire interior, the walls, the plasters underwent conservation and were protected as well. An aspect that is exceedingly important for such works is documenting the condition of the preserved element and the post-work documentation. It's always made with due diligence, other than the standard documentation, descriptive and photographic. You usually also have photogrammetric documentation, and it's used for detailed documentation in drawings, both the condition and the scope of works conducted. You can see on the left documentation, photogrammetric documentation of one of the slabs. And this is the area from the bottom of it. And you can see the support construction. And on the right, there is the documentation in drawings of how and what conservation, how we conserved it and what works were introduced. Let me finish with a brief summary. Conservation of the ruins of gas chambers is certainly one of the worst challenges that we have here while conserving those. In planning, in carrying out the works, we try to make sure that all the actions are both ethically and grounded, and also have grounding in the state of knowledge due to all the atrocities that happened here. The purpose of those works is to retain everything here in a condition as close to the authentic as possible. The form of the ruins, the division into three main parts, the undressing room, the guest chamber, and the furnaces hall. Thank you very much for your attention. I'd like to thank the speakers very much for those interesting addresses. I believe it's worthwhile now to emphasize that such a complex and multifaceted approach to all those sites as was presented here can only be possible when many experts in various fields cooperate, and that's what's happening in this division. We'll have now a short break, and we reconvene in 9 minutes' time at 6 p.m. Central European Summer Time.